The rain had just stopped when she checked her phone for the third time, pretending not to notice the waiter hovering nearby. £4.87. That was all she had left. Not enough for a second coffee, not enough for dessert, and definitely not enough for an excuse to stay if things went wrong. She smoothed her worn coat over her knees, lifted her chin, and told herself she could do this. It was only a blind date. 40 minutes, one drink, polite smiles, then she would disappear back into the cold London evening with her dignity intact. What she didn't know was that 2 tables away, a man who controlled boardrooms, markets, and thousands of jobs had already noticed her. She arrived early on purpose. Being early felt safer than being late. The cafe was warm, softly lit, and smelled of roasted beans and vanilla. It was the kind of place where people talked about ideas, not prices. Still, she'd chosen the cheapest thing on the menu and rehearsed in her mind how to laugh naturally if her date suggested sharing something more expensive. At the corner table sat the man with the quiet eyes. He looked ordinary in a way that was almost deliberate: dark coat, open collar, no visible watch. His laptop was closed. A child's drawing peeked out of the folder beside him, a stick-figure family with a bright yellow sun. He hadn't planned to be there long. Just enough time to reply to a message from his daughter's school before heading home. Then he noticed the girl with the careful posture and the anxious hands. She kept glancing at the door, then at the menu, then at her phone. Not the impatient kind of waiting. The hopeful kind. He recognized it instantly. He'd seen that same look years ago in his own reflection, back when every decision felt like a gamble and failure was always one step away. Her date arrived late. 10 minutes late. A man who spoke loudly before he sat down, who didn't apologize so much as explain. He ordered without looking at prices, without asking what she wanted, without noticing the flicker of panic that crossed her face when the waiter asked if they were ready. The man at the next table didn't mean to listen. He just did. The date talked about himself. His job, his gym routine, his opinions on things he clearly hadn't thought deeply about. He laughed at his own jokes. She smiled politely, nodding, asking questions that went unanswered. When the bill arrived, she reached instinctively for her bag, then froze. Her date barely glanced at it. "Shall we split?" he said casually, already checking his phone. Her fingers tightened around the strap of her bag. "Of course," she said, too quickly. That was when the CEO noticed her hand tremble. She excused herself to the restroom, locking the door behind her and pressing her palms to the sink. She stared at her reflection, cheeks flushed, eyes bright with unshed tears. £5. Blind dates weren't supposed to feel like this. She hadn't come for a free meal. She'd come because she was tired of being alone, tired of surviving quietly, tired of pretending she didn't deserve something gentle. Back in the cafe, the single father closed his laptop. He stood, walked to the counter, and spoke softly to the barista. A moment later, the waiter nodded and adjusted the receipt at her table. When she returned, her date was mid-sentence, complaining about traffic. The bill was gone. "Oh," she said, confused. "Did you?" "Sorted it," he replied, barely looking up. "You can get the next one." She smiled, relieved, unaware of the truth. Unaware that the man now standing by the door was watching her with something dangerously close to respect. As he passed her table, their eyes met. Just for a second. Long enough for him to notice the kindness in her expression. Long enough for her to sense something calm and steady about him. "Excuse me," he said, stopping. "I couldn't help overhearing. I think you dropped this." He placed a folded note gently on the table. "Not money. A card." She frowned. "I don't think that's mine." He smiled, a small, sincere smile. "It might be, if you ever need it." Then he left. Her date scoffed. "Weird people in this city," he muttered. She opened the card slowly. Inside was a single line, handwritten. "Never apologize for what you can afford. Some of the strongest people I know once had nothing." On the back, a name. No title. Just a phone number. Her heart thudded in her chest. Later that night, long after the date had ended awkwardly, after she'd walked home alone with the card warm in her pocket, she stood by her tiny window overlooking the street. She told herself she wouldn't call. She told herself it was just kindness, nothing more. Across the city, the man tucked his daughter into bed, listening as she talked about her day, about a girl at school who didn't have enough lunch money and pretended not to be hungry. He kissed her forehead, switched off the light, and sat in the quiet for a moment longer than usual. His phone buzzed.
An unknown number.
He looked at the screen, then at the drawing still in his folder.
Anne answered. Hello.
His voice was calm, but his heart gave a small, unexpected jolt. There was a pause on the other end. He could hear the faint sound of traffic, a car passing, footsteps on pavement. Then her voice, soft, uncertain, but steady.
I hope I'm not disturbing you.
You said, if I ever needed it. You're not disturbing me, he replied without hesitation. I'm glad you called. Another pause, this one warmer. I didn't know if I should. I almost didn't. Most people almost don't, he said. What made you change your mind? She exhaled, a quiet laugh edged with nerves. I realized I didn't want tonight to end with me feeling small.
Your note, it felt like someone saw me.
He leaned back against the wall, staring at the dim light in the hallway outside his daughter's room. I did see you, he said honestly. You were brave enough to show up. That matters.
They talked longer than either expected.
About small things at first, where she grew up, how she ended up in the city, the job she worked that never quite paid enough but taught her resilience. She spoke about numbers, budgeting every pound, about learning to stretch food for days without complaint.
She didn't speak with bitterness.
Just truth.
He listened.
Then, without realizing it, he spoke too.
About his daughter.
About learning to pack lunches and braid hair with clumsy fingers. About how success hadn't erased loneliness, only changed its shape.
He didn't mention companies or money or power. Just responsibility.
Just love. When the call ended, it was well past midnight. The next morning, she woke up lighter. Not because her life had changed, it hadn't, but because something inside her had shifted.
Someone had listened without trying to fix her. Without pity.
She found herself checking her phone more than once, then scolding herself for it.
2 days passed before a message appeared. I'll be near the South Bank this afternoon.
If you'd like a walk and a coffee, my treat this time, no expectations. She stared at the screen, heart racing. She almost said no. Old habits. Old fears. Then she remembered the note.
Okay, she typed back.
But I'm choosing the cafe.
He smiled when he read it.
They met by the river, the city alive around them. This time, he wore jeans and a jumper. No disguise, no performance, just himself. She noticed how present he was, how he didn't glance at his phone, how he listened with his whole body. She chose a small cafe, modest, familiar. When they ordered, she reached for her bag automatically.
He gently shook his head. I said my treat. And I meant it.
She hesitated, then nodded.
Thank you. They sat by the window. Sunlight spilled across the table.
She told him about her dreams, quiet ones she rarely shared. Stability.
A home that didn't feel temporary. Work that mattered. He didn't laugh. He didn't correct her. He asked questions.
At one point, she caught him watching her with an expression she couldn't name. Not desire. Not curiosity.
Something deeper.
Consideration. What? She asked, smiling. You remind me of someone I used to know, he said. Who? Myself. Before things worked out. She studied him then, really looked. The lines of tiredness around his eyes. The strength beneath the calm. Things worked out for you.
They did, he said.
But not the way people imagine. After coffee, they walked.
Talked. Laughed. It felt easy. Too easy.
What she didn't know was that the cafe owner greeted him by name when he paid. That people nodded respectfully as he passed.
That the car parked nearby wasn't just any car.
When they stopped by the bridge, she leaned on the railing, watching the water move steadily below.
Can I ask you something? She said.
Anything.
Why did you really help me that night? He didn't answer right away.
He watched the river with her. Because I recognized fear, he said finally. And courage sitting next to it.
She swallowed.
Most people only see one. I've learned to look for both. A silence settled between them, not awkward, just full.
His phone buzzed. He glanced at it, then frowned slightly.
I'm sorry. I need to take this. She nodded, stepping a little away, giving him privacy. As she turned, she noticed the name on the screen reflected faintly in the glass of a nearby window.
A name she'd seen before. In headlines. In articles. On buildings. Her breath caught. CEO. Billionaire. Single father. The realization hit her all at once, sharp and dizzying.
When he returned, she was very still.
"Is everything all right?" he asked. She looked up at him, eyes searching.
"You never told me who you were."
"I told you who I am," he said gently.
"Just not what I do." She nodded slowly, emotions colliding, embarrassment, fear, disbelief.
"Why?" "Because I wanted you to know me," he replied.
"Not the idea of me." She turned back to the river, gripping the railing. "I only had $5 that night."
"I know," he said softly.
She laughed once, brittle. "Then you know how ridiculous this feels." He stepped closer, not touching her, but close enough she could feel his presence.
"I know how strong you are," he said.
"And how little money has to do with that." She closed her eyes, breathing in the city air, trying to steady herself. When she opened them again, she looked at him, not up, not down.
"Just straight."
"If this continues," she said carefully, "it has to be real.
No saving me.
No charity."
He met her gaze without flinching.
"I wouldn't insult you by trying." The river moved on beneath them, unchanged, as the city buzzed around, two lives quietly shifting, neither of them fully aware yet of how deeply this moment would echo into everything that came next.
He walked her to the bus stop without trying to fill the silence. She appreciated that more than she expected.
When the bus arrived, she hesitated, one foot on the step, then turned back to him.
"I need time," she said honestly. "Not to decide about you. To understand what this means for me." "I'm not going anywhere," he replied.
"And I'm not chasing."
"Those are two different things."
She studied his face, as if weighing the truth of that promise, then nodded and boarded the bus. From the window, she watched him stand there until the bus pulled away, hands in his pockets, calm as ever.
That night, sleep didn't come easily.
Her small flat felt smaller somehow, as if the walls were listening to her thoughts. She replayed the moment she'd seen his name on the phone, the shock of it, the instinctive urge to retreat before she embarrassed herself further. People like him didn't cross paths with people like her.
Not without a reason. And reasons usually came with strings. Yet something about him felt different. He hadn't offered solutions. He hadn't tried to impress. He hadn't even mentioned money. The next morning, she went to work as usual. The cafe was busy, the espresso machine hissing like an impatient animal. She moved on autopilot, smiling at customers, counting change, wiping counters. Halfway through her shift, her manager waved her over. "There's someone asking for you," he said, puzzled. "Says he'll wait." Her heart skipped. "Who is it?"
"Didn't say."
She stepped out from behind the counter and froze.
He stood near the window, holding a small paper bag, looking wildly out of place and completely at ease at the same time. When he saw her, his expression softened, relief flickering across his face. "I hope this isn't inappropriate," he said quietly. "I remembered you saying mornings were hard."
He handed her the bag. Inside was a croissant and a small carton of orange juice. Nothing extravagant. Just thoughtful.
She glanced at her manager, who shrugged. "Your break," he said.
They sat at a small table near the back.
"You didn't have to do this," she said, though her voice lacked conviction.
"I know," he replied.
"I wanted to."
She took a bite, surprised by how hungry she was.
"I meant what I said yesterday," she added.
"About needing time." "I know," he said again.
"I'm not here to rush anything. Just to show consistency." The word lingered between them. Over the next weeks, that's exactly what he did.
He showed up. Not constantly. Not dramatically.
Just enough to become familiar.
A text asking how her day went.
A short call after he put his daughter to bed. Walks that ended before they crossed any lines she wasn't ready for.
She learned small things about him. That he cooked surprisingly well. That he hated flying.
That he still kept his late wife's scarf tucked in a drawer, not out of sadness, but respect. He learned that she cried during commercials if the music was right. That she wrote lists she never showed anyone. That she counted steps when she was anxious. One evening, she finally asked, "Does your daughter know about me?"
He nodded. "She knows I met someone kind."
"That's all. That's all she needs to know right now." She smiled, touched by his restraint.
But the world didn't move at their pace.
One afternoon, a woman in an immaculate coat walked into the cafe and asked for her by name. She introduced herself smoothly, eyes sharp, voice polite but cold.
I work with him, she said. I thought it might be wise to speak. They Saturday. The woman didn't order anything. You should be careful, she said plainly. People will talk. They'll assume things. About why he's interested. About what you want. Her chest tightened.
And what do you assume?
The woman hesitated, then sighed. I assume you're decent. Which makes this complicated.
After she left, the cafe felt different.
Quieter. Heavier. That night, she confronted him.
Your world is already pressing in, she said.
I didn't ask for this. I know, he replied.
And if you want to walk away, I won't stop you.
Do you ever fight for what you want? She asked.
Yes, he said softly. But never at the cost of someone else's peace. She turned away, conflicted, emotions pulling her in opposite directions.
She wanted safety. She wanted honesty.
She wanted to believe that this wasn't a story that ended with her being a lesson learned.
Days passed with little contact. Silence stretched.
She focused on work, on surviving, on reminding herself that she'd been fine before him. Then one evening, her landlord called.
The building had been sold. She had 30 days.
She sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the wall, the weight of it pressing down on her chest. She reached for her phone, then stopped.
She couldn't call him for this. She wouldn't. A knock came at her door.
When she opened it, he stood there, rain-soaked, eyes searching her face. I didn't come to fix anything, he said quickly. I came because you sounded like you were disappearing.
Her composure cracked. Just a little. I don't need rescuing, she whispered.
I know, he said, stepping closer, voice steady. But you don't have to do everything alone. She looked at him then, not as a CEO, not as a miracle, but as a man who had stayed, even when staying was inconvenient. Her hand shook as she let him in, the door closing softly behind them, the city humming outside. Unaware that something fragile and powerful was unfolding inside that small room, something neither of them could control anymore.
He didn't move further into the room until she gestured him in.
The flat was modest. One narrow sofa, a small table scarred with use, shelves crowded with books and mismatched mugs.
He took it in without judgment, without surprise.
If anything, his gaze softened. I'm sorry, she said automatically, then stopped herself.
I don't know why I said that. You don't need to apologize, he replied. Not here.
She sat on the edge of the sofa, arms wrapped around herself. He remained standing for a moment, unsure, then took the chair opposite her, keeping a respectful distance. The rain tapped lightly against the window, filling the silence. The building's been sold, she said finally. 30 days. I'll manage. I always do.
I know you will, he said.
That's not in question. She looked at him, searching his face.
Then why are you here?
Because managing doesn't mean it doesn't hurt,
he answered quietly. And because you went quiet. You don't do that unless something's wrong. Her throat tightened. She looked away, blinking hard.
I didn't want to give anyone a reason to think I'm expecting something.
From me?
From anyone. He leaned forward slightly, elbows resting on his knees.
Let me be very clear, he said. I'm not here because you need help. I'm here because I care.
If you tell me to leave, I will. If you ask me to stay, I'll stay. Those are your choices.
She nodded slowly, absorbing his words.
Stay, she said, barely above a whisper. They didn't touch. They just sat, the weight of the day easing a fraction simply because someone else was carrying part of it.
After a while, he spoke again.
Would it help to talk through options, he asked. Not solutions. Just possibilities.
She considered it.
Maybe. They talked practically. Short-term rentals.
Friends of friends. Budget realities. He never once offered his own place. Never once suggested anything that would tilt the balance between them. She noticed. It mattered more than she could explain.
As the evening wore on, the tension softened into something gentler. He told her about the first flat he'd lived in after university, how he'd slept on the floor for weeks and used a suitcase as a table. She laughed, surprised. You? Yes, he said, smiling. Believe it or not, I wasn't always this composed. You hide it well. Only because I learned how, he replied. The hard way.
When he finally stood to leave, it was late. He paused at the door. I'll check in tomorrow, he said. Unless you'd rather I didn't. She met his eyes. I'd like that.
After he left, the flat felt different, not bigger, not richer, but less lonely. She slept better than she had in weeks. The days that followed were a blur of viewings and conversations.
Some places were too expensive. Some were too far.
Some looked promising, then vanished before she could apply. Through it all, he remained steady.
Encouraging without pushing. Present without hovering.
One afternoon, exhausted and discouraged, she met him for lunch near his office. The building loomed tall and glassy, people in sharp suits moving in and out with purpose.
She hesitated at the entrance. I don't belong here, she murmured. He stopped and turned to face her fully.
You belong wherever you choose to stand, he said. Including here. Including with me. Inside, heads turned.
Whispers followed.
She felt them like a physical weight. At the table, she fidgeted, suddenly aware of her worn shoes, her simple coat.
He noticed. Hey, he said gently.
Look at me.
She did.
This room doesn't get to decide your worth, he continued. Neither do the people in it. She nodded, grounding herself in his calm. Halfway through lunch, a man approached their table.
Confident. Curious.
Didn't expect to see you here, he said to him, then glanced at her. Business?
He answered without hesitation.
Personal. The word landed with quiet force. Later, as they walked back outside, she let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding.
That was terrifying. He smiled.
You did well. I didn't do anything.
You stayed, he said.
That counts.
That evening, she found a listing she liked. Small.
Affordable.
Available.
She sent the details to him without thinking, then immediately worried she'd crossed a line.
His reply came quickly. It looks promising.
Want company to see it? She stared at the message, heart thudding.
Yes, she typed back. The flat was on a quiet street, light-filled and modest.
As she walked through it, she could almost imagine herself there.
Breathing. Resting. Becoming something more than tired.
Outside, she turned to him, eyes bright. I think this could work.
I think so too, he said. She hesitated. There's a deposit gap. Not huge.
I can figure it out.
He held her gaze.
Tell me if this crosses a boundary, he said carefully.
But I'd like to offer a loan. In writing. With terms.
No pressure. No expectation. Her instinct was to refuse.
Pride flared. Then she paused. A loan, she repeated.
Yes, he said. Between equals.
She swallowed, emotion rising.
I'll pay it back.
I know, he replied. She nodded once.
Okay.
It was a small word for such a big moment.
As they walked back toward the station, her phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number.
A photo attachment. She opened it. It was a picture of a little girl holding up a drawing. 2 stick figures holding hands.
A river. A sun. Below it, a message. She asked if she could draw the woman who makes me smile.
Her chest tightened.
She showed him the screen.
He watched her reaction closely. I told her only what was true, he said.
That you're kind. And brave. She looked up at him, overwhelmed. I don't know where this is going, she said honestly.
He nodded.
Neither do I. They stood there for a moment, the city moving around them, neither rushing, neither retreating, both aware that something delicate was forming, slowly, imperfectly, but with intention, something that would test them in ways they hadn't yet imagined, something that had already begun to change the shape of their lives in quiet, irreversible ways.
She didn't answer him right away.
Instead, she looked again at the drawing on her phone. The uneven lines, the oversized sun, the 2 figures standing close but not touching. It felt like an invitation and a warning at the same time. Slowly, she slipped the phone back into her pocket. Let's take it one step at a time, she said. He smiled, not disappointed, not relieved, just present. That's all I ever wanted. The weeks that followed were full of quiet milestones. She moved into the new flat, carrying boxes up the narrow stairs with aching arms and a heart that felt strangely hopeful. He showed up with his sleeves rolled up, assembling shelves badly but enthusiastically, laughing when they leaned crooked. When she insisted on buying dinner with her own money that night, he didn't argue. He just said thank you and meant it. She paid back the first part of the loan sooner than expected. Not because he asked, He never did, but because it mattered to her. When she handed him the envelope, her hands steady, he looked at her like she'd given him something priceless.
"I knew you would," he said.
"No," she corrected softly. "You trusted that I would."
Something shifted between them then. Not dramatically, not loudly, but permanently. She met his daughter properly on a Sunday afternoon in the park.
She'd been terrified, rehearsing what to say, how to stand, how not to seem like an intruder in a world built on loss and love. But the little girl ran up to her, fearless, holding out a dandelion. "Daddy says you're brave," she announced. She laughed, tears threatening. "Does he?"
"Yes. And kind."
"And that you drink coffee even when it's cold." She glanced at him, embarrassed.
He shrugged.
"I tell the truth." They sat on a bench, the child between them, swinging her legs, talking about school and dreams and how she wanted to be an artist or a scientist or maybe both. In that moment, she didn't feel poor or small or temporary. She felt included. The world, of course, noticed eventually. Articles appeared. Photos were taken. Opinions were formed by people who had never met her, never known the weight of counting coins or the courage of showing up with only $5 and a hopeful heart.
Some said she was lucky. Others said she was strategic. A few said worse.
One evening, after a particularly cruel headline, she sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the screen, doubt creeping in like a familiar shadow. "Maybe they are right," she whispered when he called. "Maybe I don't belong in your world." There was a pause on the line, then his voice, firm, unwavering. "You are not in my world," he said. "I'm in yours. I chose it. I still choose it." She closed her eyes, letting the words settle deep. "And if it gets harder?" "It will," he said honestly. "But we won't measure ourselves by what they say. We'll measure ourselves by how we treat each other." She breathed out slowly. "Okay." Months passed. Seasons changed. She found a better job, one she earned entirely on her own. The pride in his eyes when she told him was unmistakable. He didn't celebrate with champagne or grand gestures. He cooked dinner, burned the garlic bread, and laughed when the smoke alarm went off. One night, walking along the river where it had all nearly unraveled, she stopped. The water moved steadily below them, just as it had before. "Do you remember when I said I only had $5? She asked. "I remember," he replied. "I thought that meant I had nothing to offer." He turned to her fully then, taking her hands, not to rescue, not to lead, but to meet her where she stood. "You offered honesty when it was uncomfortable. Dignity when it was hard. Courage when it would have been easier to disappear. Money never built what we have." She smiled, eyes shining. "Neither did fear." He nodded. "Exactly." When he finally told her he loved her, it wasn't during a perfect moment. It was an ordinary evening, dishes half done, his daughter asleep, the city quiet beyond the window. The words came out simply, without ceremony. She didn't answer right away. Then she said, "I love you too," not because she needed him, not because he saved her, but because she chose him, fully, freely. Years later, people would still tell the story wrong. They'd say the poor girl met a CEO and her life changed overnight. They'd skip the parts about restraint, about boundaries, about respect. They'd miss the truth. The truth was simpler and rarer. A woman walked into a cafe with $5 and her self-worth intact. A man noticed, not her lack, but her strength. And instead of trying to buy her life, he walked beside her long enough for her to build it herself. Everything else, the love, the family, the future, grew from that.